Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 103 in its podcast. Today's date is December the 9th. In today's podcast, we're going to go through a bunch of topics. We'll start with some topics that deal with the NBA and college basketball, kind of like a quick hitting segment that we're now going to call tip-off topics. And then we'll spend the rest of the podcast talking about the NBA Cup with a little bit of a buzzer beater. Just so you guys know a little bit differently now, we will be doing it sometimes on TV. So we're going to kind of get this started with what we call the tip-off topics. And the tip-off topics are basically what I think are the biggest stories going on in basketball. First topic off the bat is the injury bug. A couple of injuries that I've noted that have come down the pipe. First off, Shams Charania reporting that New Orleans Pelicans star Brandon Ingram is out indefinitely with a lower left ankle sprain. Now, here's the thing, folks. This is a team in the New Orleans Pelicans that are 5-19 right now. They're the worst record in the Western Conference. You have to look at the fact that not only is Brandon Ingram out, but Zion is still out. Alvarado is out. Herb Jones missed significant time. CJ McCollum missed significant time. And DeJounte Murray, who they just got in a trade from Atlanta, fractured his hand opening night. So this team that we were really high on is really stumbling here, and it's something of note as we look at, particularly Brandon Ingram really quick. I think this is going to be trade or extend Brandon Ingram. They tried to do it before the season started. It didn't work. He switched agents. So something to watch out for with Brandon Ingram. Not just the injury, but could Brandon Ingram be traded either before the deadline or in the summer if they can't reach an extension? Speaking of other injuries that have taken place, we look at the fact that Franz Wagner is now out for the Orlando Magic with, ready folks, a torn oblique. What's weird about this? Paolo Banchero's out. Guess what he's out with? A torn oblique. And this is a team that's been, and especially Franz, has been playing so well for the Orlando Magic. Orlando Magic team that we'll talk about previewing their matchup here, but when you look to use your two bookend forwards in Wagner and in Banchero, it's going to take his big brother, Mo Wagner, to kind of step up. Wendell Carter Jr., Jalen Suggs, KCP. Jamal Mosley's done a great job, and right now we need to talk about him as Coach of the Year. But they got to get these two guys right, or this team in Orlando could head south quickly. Topic number 2. Kansas, the number 1 team in the country, folks, is now the number 10 team in the country as they dropped 2 games this past week, both on the road. First off, losing by, I think, about 12 points or so, 13 points, 76-63 versus Creighton, and then losing yesterday 76-67 to Missouri. So what is going on at Kansas and Bill Self, why the number 1 team in the country went down twice? Simply put, number 1, Zeke Mayo, their star transfer, folks, is shooting 31% from 3. Why do you think that's a big deal? Because Zeke has never shot less than 37% from 3 in his career before getting to Kansas. So going to Kansas and the lights kind of shining a little bit brighter on Zeke has been a little bit of a problem. The other one, guard, not shooting well, is DeJuan Harris, the senior guard, who's been very much experienced, one of the top point guards in the nation, but now you're looking at him shooting at 26% from 3. Well, the lowest he shot in his career before that is 32.3. So now if you're a team and you're playing a point guard that can't shoot the ball, now you back off of him and dare him to shoot. So if you dare him to shoot, that means he doesn't have driving lane. So now one of the top assist players in the country can't get to his spot to dime people up. So those are 2 things individually you're looking at Kansas, you're saying, wow, they got to get better at it. But if you look at the 2 games specifically, folks, that just took place, number 1 with Creighton, they got out-rebounded by 13. When you got Abrams and you got Hunter Dickinson, you cannot get out-rebounded by 13. I know that Kalkbrenner is an absolute load at 7-1 for Creighton, but to get out-rebounded by 13 on the road does not give you a chance. So what happens in the next game? Well, they out-rebound Missouri, but they turned the ball over 11 extra times. See, when you go on the road, folks, you have to understand there are 3 things you got to win. Really got to win. You got to win a turnover battle. You got to win the free throw line battle, right? You got to win the rebounding battle, right? So if you could turn over less, right? If you could rebound even or better and beat the free throw line even or better, you're going to give yourself a great chance to win. Bill Self's team has struggled in one of those two areas in the last two games, and that's why this Kansas team has fallen to 10. It'll be interesting to see how this team moves forward. Also remember, some of those big wins they had early in the year, including at North Carolina, all were at home. Now they're going on the road and struggling. Next game for Kansas is later on this week, the 14th. Got to remember, folks, this is a big time for like final exams. Teams don't play games during finals. So you'll see a lot of teams have longer breaks in this next week to 2 week stretch. Let's head, next topic going on to is deals with the WNBA. And Sabrina Ionescu has just had a UCL procedure done, stabilized the UCL in her right thumb. Now, it's interesting to note because when it took place, Sabrina Ionescu hurt this in game number 4 of the WNBA finals. So when you're saying to yourself, like, wow, coach, why is that such a big deal? Folks, you got to remember, Sabrina Ionescu hit those two absolute daggers in game number 3 to win at Minnesota, right? But then you start to look at what happened after that, right? Well, if you look at the game number 4, yes, she played pretty decently, said Sabrina, but it's more of game number 5. Game number 5, she struggled mightily in that game. I think she shot about 1 for 18 from the floor, couldn't hit a shot the entire game. And me knowing Sabrina, knowing what the shooter she is, I knew something had to be up with Sab. Well, we know what was up with Sab. Sab was hurt. So we'll see Sabrina Ionescu get herself healthy. That may change things in regard to will she be ready to play in the three-point shooter, maybe match versus Steph Curry. Staying in the women's game really quick, South Carolina, oh my Lord, they are back. Listen, after losing to UCLA, they beat Iowa State by 40. They beat Purdue by 50. They had Duke down 20, and they just rolled TCU by 33 points on the road. Simply put, folks, with this team, with 7 or 8 girls that can score 8 points a game or more, Dawn Staley can wear you out. And that's exactly what she did in that matchup versus Mark Campbell and Chivy Lopez. Simply put, if they play like this, ain't no one beating them. Last topic, really quick. The Lakers, right? They're all over the place. Folks, they are what we knew they were going to be. How about this? Lakers, I'll leave you with this. 8-1 against sub-500 teams, 5-10 with teams over 500. This is a team that's got to make sure that they play better against the top teams in the NBA. Otherwise, this is a team that's not going to get better. They did move Vincent into the starting lineup. D'Angelo Russell, big game off the bench. But like I said, my measuring stick with the Lakers is going to be based off of what happens once they play better teams. Coming up next on this episode of Betting Above the Rim podcast, we will get into the NBA Cup as I discuss with you what I think will go on. We'll talk about who wins the NBA Cup, and then we'll kind of get into who can come out of the East, who can come out of the West, and then we'll wrap it up talking about in the last segment, we'll talk about the games coming on Tuesday and Wednesday. Once again, we'll be back in a couple minutes as we break down the NBA Cup here on the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Be sure to tune in when we come out of this commercial break. We'll talk more hoops, NBA Cup time. It's fantastic. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. And now that we've gotten to this point of December 9th, we are now looking at the NBA Cup. All the group play games have been played, and now we get to the nitty-gritty. 8 teams vying for the NBA Cup title. Here are the odds as of right now. The Oklahoma City Thunder is at plus 280 right now to win the NBA Cup, followed by the New York Knicks at plus 310, Milwaukee at 4.5 to 1, Houston at 7 to 1, Dallas at 7.5, 8.5 for Golden State, 23 to 1 to Atlanta, and 24 to 1 for Orlando. So when you start looking at this, a lot of this has to do, folks, with the brackets, right? And I think the brackets can kind of tell a tale of what people are thinking in regard to this. So simply put, when you look at the top seed in Oklahoma City Thunder, right? They have the Dallas Mavericks, right, on tomorrow night. We'll talk about that later on. And then a 2-3 seed is Houston versus Golden State. So when you look at the NBA Cup, they look at Oklahoma City being number one, probably one of the best teams in the NBA, maybe the best team in the NBA if you look at who's in the NBA Cup, being that both Boston and Cleveland out of the East are not in it, right? So they look like they should be the prohibitive favorite, right? Which makes sense. When you go to the East, you have the Knicks, which is interesting enough because the Knicks are ahead of Milwaukee by a little less than $1.50, even though Milwaukee is the number 1 seed versus the Magic at 4. Remember, no Banchero, no Wagner, right, in that matchup tomorrow night. We'll talk about that more in the next segment. So the Knicks are the 2nd seed in regards to NBA Cup titles, the favorite to come out of the East over Milwaukee. Why is that? Matchups make fights. Styles make fights. So when I look at this, who do I think can win the NBA Cup, right? I do believe, and this could be Phantom, and you know what? I'm going to throw Phantom out of the side. I can't do it. I can't do it. I want to do it so bad. It should be Oklahoma City. Now, the reason why you can think maybe New York is there's a chance that Dallas can pick off Oklahoma City in that 1-4 matchup, being the fact that Dallas has won 8-9 out of the last 10 games. That's going to be a great matchup on tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But when you look at it, it should be Oklahoma City. But I wouldn't blame you if you take the Knicks at plus 310 because I think they're going to beat the Hawks. Remember, the Hawks have already beat the Knicks, right? And then you get a Milwaukee team, which I don't know if they match up well with the Knicks. Particularly the fact that Brook Lopez having to come out and play Karl Anthony Towns, and they've never had an answer for Jalen Brunson. So you know what? Forget it. I'm going to keep my fandom. Give me the New York Knicks plus 310 to win the NBA Cup. I think that they, with that team, now you got to question sometimes their effort, okay? Look at the game that they had against Detroit over the weekend. They've had these stinkers, but when they're dialed in and they want to win this, particularly Brunson talking about getting those guys a check at $500,000, right? He wanted to get those two-way guys, those minimum guys. He wants to get those guys, those rookies, the Pacom Daddiers, the Jacob Toppins, right? The Tyler Koleks, those young kids. He wants to get them that check. It means a lot to Brunson. And honestly, folks, it's going to mean a lot to this New York Knicks franchise that's never been back to the Eastern Conference Finals or the NBA Finals since 1999. And obviously, we know they haven't won a championship since '73. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the Knicks to win the NBA Cup. So when you look at to come out of the East, right, the Knicks coming out of the East in the NBA Cup are the favorites to come out of these. Those are the odds. You're either reach the finals. It's a plus 105. With the Bucks being a plus 145. It's really a 2-team race out of the East, right? I think no one really believes in Orlando, although they can play the game close to the best. With the play of Jamal Mosley as the coach, as a guy that right now is a front runner coach here, but no Wagner, and obviously no Banchero is a problem for them. But then you look at Atlanta going against New York. New York should be able to take them out. Knicks are already favored by 7.5. We'll talk about that next segment. So, yes, that makes sense. Plus 105 for the Knicks. On the other side, it should be Oklahoma City Thunder. But I would not blame you one bit if you took Dallas at plus 360 or Houston at 3-1. I think Houston's going to take out Golden State. And do know the Rockets have beaten the Thunder already. So maybe the play is Houston money line, get them through, and then go and hit them again against OKC. Okay? So that deals with the Cup Finals. Is we're looking at New York plus 105, but in the West, I'm kind of thinking about this a little bit. That Dallas and Houston number at 300 plus 300 and plus 360 is intriguing. Really quick, when we get to the MVP, right? Giannis plus 310, Brunson plus 550. Luka 8-1, Giannis 6.5-1, Steph Curry 8.5-1. The guy I'm looking at, honestly, is Karl Anthony Towns. If you get to the finals, and it's the Knicks, and they're playing, okay, let's say they're playing OKC. Brunson is going to deal with SGA, who's tough defensively. It's Cat versus Hartenstein, which is very important. Hartenstein struggled to defend outside, right? If he goes against Şengün, they struggle to guard. Şengün struggles to guard bigs. So I'm looking at Karl Anthony Towns at 10-1 to be the MVP. If I think the Knicks are going to win it, then I'm looking at Cat at 10-1 to win it, because I think Brunson dealing with either dealing with Kyrie and defending Kyrie or Luka, or looking at the flip side of him dealing with someone like SJ guarding him, I think that's going to be a little bit of an issue. So we'll take Cat at 10-1 to win the MVP. Coming up, we'll wrap up the Betting Above the Rim podcast, breaking down the 4 games in the NBA Cup tipping off Tuesday and Wednesday night. And then I got a little buzzer beater, a treat, where I'm calling out a fan base because I think they got to get their act together before you worry about their team. We'll be back in a couple minutes on Betting Above the Rim. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. And now that we've gotten to the NBA Cup and we've talked about the odds to win the NBA Cup, let's break down the games tipping off on Tuesday and Wednesday. Do note at time of recording that the games that are tipping place on Wednesday, there are no props out. So everything that I'm going to give you is going to be for all 4 games, could be based off of odds, right? So odds or team totals. So look for that. But do know on tomorrow, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, look for my my plays, my high fives as I give you my plays for those games when on the Sports Grid app and on social media. But let's get started. First game, Orlando versus Milwaukee. Line right now is sitting at 7.5 here. But here's the key thing, right? The Bucks are 8-2 straight up their last 10 games, and they've played really their best basketball. They've gotten Chris Middleton back, and now they're at a point now where they should be starting to roll a little bit versus an Orlando team that's going to be playing their first game without Wagner. Remember, Wagner got hurt on Saturday night in that win versus Phoenix. So when you look at this game here, you have to be looking at minus the points for the Milwaukee Bucks. I think this is a situation where they need success, and I think it's important for them to get this win and get themselves to the next part of the knockout round. The line had moved, folks. It was at 5 to open. It's gotten to 7.5. So it's been 7.5, 8. So when I look at this matchup, I'm going to look squarely at minus the points here for the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they get a big win over the Orlando Magic that obviously have the injuries to their roster. Next matchup, taking place. It's going to be a really great matchup. And that is basically OKC versus Dallas. Now, when you look at this Dallas Mavericks team, folks, come on. I mean, what can we say about them? Dallas is, I think they're 8-2 against the spread in their last 10 games. So I'm sorry, 9-1 against the spread, 8-2 against the spread, 9-1 straight up. Their one loss being a 123-118 loss at Miami. So when you look at this team, they've played really good basketball here. They got some good wins. New York, good win. Memphis, good win. Obviously, awful at Miami. They won at Denver. Denver wasn't right. So they're going against Oklahoma City. So you would think with the way that Oklahoma City is, when it's a 3 straight, 6 of their last 7, or 7 of their last 8, who would I take? You think Dallas, right? I'm gonna go with OKC. I think the fact that they haven't had any games on the road, I'm gonna go Dallas. I'm gonna go and take OKC -4.5. With the Knick game, I want to wait for the total to come out. If they hang the Knick total at 118.5 or lower, take the Knicks team total over. They've gone over 125 in the last 10. Atlanta's given up that in 5 of the last 10 as well. And the Knicks should be in a bad mood, and they should roll Toronto to get that job done. They play Monday, then Wednesday. So look at that. And then lastly, I'm going to take Houston Rockets on the money line versus the Golden State Warriors. I like this Rockets team. I think Ime Udoka's done a great job. They're going to have a problem with Şengün inside, and I just like the overall depth of Houston. Let's end today's podcast with a buzzer beater as I call out a fan base. And folks, you could say it's but who I know and what's going on. I'm defending Shaheen Holloway. I know Seton Hall is struggling. I know they just lost to Oklahoma State. I know they gave Monmouth their only win of the season. But I want people to understand it's in the day of college basketball. NIL equals wins. Villanova, Marquette, all these other teams have way more resources, UConn, than what Shaheen Holloway has. So Seton Hall, very simply put, if you want this guy to stay and you want this team to win, you have to go out and you got to provide Shaheen Holloway, Ryan Whalen, Coach Davis, and the rest of that staff with the NIL money to allow that team to compete. Otherwise, there'll be a bottom feeder, and Shaheen Holloway will take his tail and he'll leave you and he'll go get a better job. This has been your Betting Above the Rim podcast. Next podcast will take place on Wednesday night. We'll recap the games that took place in the NBA, and we'll start to look at a little bit of the awards race coming down the pipe in the NBA. For my producer, Matt George, for Rebecca Harrelson's whole idea, thank you for watching. Remember, folks, here's the key thing. See that app? See that app right there? Make sure you download that app. Pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more. This is Coach Young. Thank you so much for listening to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Remember, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.